Tyler Matthews adjusted his bow tie in the reflection of the gleaming silver tray he carried, the sound of champagne glasses clinking filling the air around him. He hated working these galas, where the elite sipped expensive drinks and traded gossip about people like him, invisible to their world. But tonight felt particularly unbearable. His mother's hospital bills loomed over him, and every step he took in the opulent ballroom. "Excuse me, young man," a sharp voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Tyler turned to see an older woman with piercing gray eyes, her presence commanding despite her petite frame. Evelyn Harper. He'd heard her name whispered with equal parts reverence and fear among the waitstaff. She was said to be sharp as a knife in twick. "Yes, ma'am?" Tyler asked, maintaining. "You're blocking my view," she said flatly, her tone more observational than rude. But as he stepped aside, her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary, studying him as though he were a puzzle she. The night continued, with Tyler weaving through the crowd and overhearing snippets of conversations about hedge funds, art collections, and luxury vacations. His world couldn't have felt farther away. By the time the event ended, he was exhausted, ready to collect his tea. But Evelyn Harper wasn't done with him. "Wait," she called out as he passed by her. He hesitated but approached, unsure of what to expect. "What's your name?" she asked, her tone softer now. "Tyler, ma'am." "Tyler Matthews." "Tell me, Tyler, do you enjoy working these events?" It wasn't the question he expected. "They pay the bills," he replied honestly. She smiled, faint but perceptible. "Bills?" "Yes, I imagine you have quite a few of those." Tyler's heart sank. Was she mocking him? Her expression, however, suggested something else entirely, curiosity. Before he could respond, she handed him a small card. "Call me tomorrow," she said simply, her voice leaving no room for argument. Tyler stared at the card as she walked away, heels clicking against the marble floor. It bore her name in elegant print and a phone number beneath it. He stuffed it into his pocket, unsure whether he'd ever actually use it. The next morning, he found himself dialing the number. His curiosity won out over his apprehension. Evelyn answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and clear. "Meet me at the Harper estate. Noon sharp." The Harper estate was more a fortress than a house, with towering gates and sprawling gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly. Tyler felt out of place the moment he stepped through the door, his worn shoes squeaking against the polished floors. Evelyn greeted him in the parlor, seated on a velvet armchair with a steaming cup of tea in hand. She gestured for him to sit, and he complied, the chair beneath him far too plush for his comfort. "I'm not one for small talk," she began, setting her cup down. "So, I'll get straight to the point. I have a proposition for you." Tyler straightened in his seat. "What kind of proposition?" Evelyn leaned forward, her gray eyes locking onto his. "Marriage." He blinked, sure he had misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," she said matter-of-factly. "I need a husband. You need money. It's a practical arrangement, nothing more." Tyler laughed nervously. "This is some kind of joke, right?" "I assure you, I don't joke about such matters," Evelyn replied, unamused. "You'll receive financial stability, enough to clear your debts and provide for your mother. In return, you'll accompany me to events, manage appearances, and offer companionship. That's all." Tyler stared at her, his mind racing. It sounded absurd, but the promise of financial security was tempting. He thought of his mother, frail and bedridden, and the bills that seemed to multiply every week. Could he really do this? "Why me?" he finally asked. "You're smart," she said simply. "And you don't bore me." Despite the surreal nature of the proposal, Tyler found himself nodding slowly. "I'll need to think about it." "Take your time," Evelyn said, though her tone suggested she didn't expect him to decline. 2 weeks later, in a small ceremony attended by only a handful of witnesses, Tyler and Evelyn were married. The headlines came fast and brutal: young waiter marries wealthy widow, gold digger or love story. Tyler avoided the articles, burying himself in the routines Evelyn laid out for him. Their arrangement was functional but distant. Evelyn kept her promises, clearing Tyler's debts and ensuring his mother received the best care. In return, Tyler played the dutiful husband in public, though he remained wary of her true intentions. 7 days after their wedding, Tyler sat across from Evelyn at breakfast, the clinking of silverware filling the silence. She set down her fork and fixed him with a serious expression. "I need your help with something," she said. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "What kind of help?" Evelyn's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed something deeper, something vulnerable. "There's a bauble from my past. A box, buried 50 years ago. And I need you to help me dig it up." Tyler stared at Evelyn, his fork hovering mid-air over his plate of eggs. The gravity in her tone caught him off guard, and for a moment, he wasn't sure if she was serious. "A box," he repeated, setting down his fork. "You need my help to dig up a box?" "Yes," Evelyn replied firmly, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin. "It's not just any box. It holds personal items. Things I thought I'd never need again, but circumstances have changed." Tyler leaned back in his chair, trying to process her words. "And why do you need me for this? Don't you have a staff for things like that? Or, I don't know, a gardener?" Her gaze hardened, and for the first time since he met her, there was a flicker of vulnerability in her expression. "This is not something I want anyone else involved in. I trust you, Tyler. And I need someone who can be discreet." "Discreet about what?" he pressed. "If it's just some old keepsakes, why all the secrecy?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She lifted her cup of tea, her hands trembling ever so slightly, and took a measured sip. When she set it down, her voice was quieter. "Because what's in that box could disrupt some very powerful people's lives. And possibly mine." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Tyler felt a sudden unease creep over him. Whatever this box contained, it was far more than sentimental trinkets. "Where is it?" he asked cautiously. Evelyn straightened in her chair, her composure returning. "On the grounds of a property I once owned. Unfortunately, I sold it years ago. It's now owned by Charles Whitmore." Tyler's brow furrowed. The name rang a bell. Whitmore was a real estate tycoon known for his ruthless business practices. "You're telling me we have to sneak onto Whitmore's property to dig up this box?" "Precisely," she said, as though it were the most reasonable request in the world. Tyler let out a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Do you have any idea how insane this sounds?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "I'm fully aware of how it sounds, Mr. Matthews. But I'm asking for your help because I believe you're capable of doing this. Or was my trust misplaced?" Her words stung. Tyler wanted to refuse, to walk away from whatever strange web she was weaving. But the image of his mother in her hospital bed flashed in his mind, along with the weight of Evelyn's generosity in paying for her care. He owed her, didn't he? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right. I'll help you. But you need to tell me everything. What's in that box? Why is it so important?" Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "I'll tell you what you need to know when the time comes. For now, just trust me." Tyler opened his mouth to protest but stopped himself. There was no point in pushing her. Evelyn Harper was a woman who only revealed what she wanted, when she wanted. "Fine. When do we start?" "Tonight," she said without hesitation. "Whitmore rarely visits that estate, but his staff may still be around. We'll need to be quick." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Tyler found himself driving Evelyn's sleek black car along a winding, tree-lined road. Evelyn sat beside him, her posture rigid and her eyes fixed ahead. She clutched a folded map in her lap, her fingers gripping the edges tightly. "Are you sure about this?" Tyler asked, breaking the tense silence. "We're trespassing, you know. If we get caught—" "We won't get caught," Evelyn interrupted, her voice sharp. "Just focus on driving." Tyler clenched his jaw and turned his attention back to the road. A few minutes later, Evelyn instructed him to pull over near a break in the tall iron fence that surrounded Whitmore's sprawling estate. The property stretched out in the darkness, illuminated faintly by moonlight. It looked more like a private park than a backyard, with rolling hills, manicured gardens, and a large fountain glistening in the distance. "Here," Evelyn said, unfolding the map and pointing to a spot marked with an X. "The box is buried near an old oak tree just beyond the gardens." Tyler peered at the map, squinting in the dim light. "How are we supposed to find one tree in all this?" "I remember exactly where it is," Evelyn said confidently. "Let's go." They slipped through the gap in the fence, Evelyn moving with surprising agility for her age. Tyler followed close behind, his heart pounding in his chest. The stillness of the estate was unnerving, broken only by the distant chirping of crickets. After what felt like an eternity of weaving through hedges and flower beds, they reached the oak tree. Its gnarled branches stretched upward like skeletal fingers, casting eerie shadows on the ground. "This is it," Evelyn whispered, her voice tinged with both relief and urgency. "Start digging." Tyler grabbed the small spade they had brought and began to dig, the soft earth giving way beneath his hands. The silence around them grew heavier with each passing minute, the only sound the rhythmic scrape of metal against dirt. Just as Tyler's muscles began to ache, the blade struck something solid. "I think I found it," he said, glancing up at Evelyn. Her face was pale, her breathing uneven. "Keep going," she urged. With a few more scoops of dirt, the box came into view, a rusted metal container, its edges worn with time. Tyler heaved it out of the ground and set it down in front of Evelyn, who knelt beside it, her hands trembling as she reached for the latch. Before she could open it, the beam of a flashlight swept across the ground, accompanied by a stern voice. "Who's there?" Tyler's blood ran cold as he turned to see two security guards approaching, their faces shadowed but their presence unmistakable. Evelyn's expression hardened, and she straightened, her voice calm but commanding. "We're leaving," she said simply, clutching the box to her chest. The guards hesitated, clearly recognizing her but unsure of how to respond. Before they could stop her, Evelyn strode past them, her head held high, with Tyler scrambling to follow. To his amazement, the guards didn't pursue them. As they climbed back into the car, Tyler shot her a bewildered look. "How did you—" "Not now," Evelyn interrupted, her voice steely. "We'll talk when we get home." The car roared to life, and they sped away into the night, the box sitting heavy on Evelyn's lap and Tyler's mind swirling with unanswered questions. The drive back to the Harper estate was silent, the weight of the rusted box in Evelyn's lap filling the space between them like an unspoken secret. Tyler gripped the steering wheel tighter with every mile, his mind racing. Who were those guards? How did Evelyn manage to walk away so effortlessly? And, most importantly, what was in the box that made her so desperate to retrieve it? When they finally pulled into the estate, Evelyn was the first to break the silence. "Park near the side entrance," she said, her voice calm but clipped. Tyler did as instructed, cutting the engine. She opened her door and stepped out, holding the box close to her chest. Tyler followed her inside, into a study that was as intimidating as Evelyn herself. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, and a grand oak desk stood in the center, its polished surface reflecting the dim light of the chandelier above. Evelyn set the box down carefully on the desk, running her fingers over its rusted edges. Tyler leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "All right, Evelyn. Time to stop with the secrets. What's in the box?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. She opened a drawer in the desk and pulled out a key. Its intricate design suggested it was as old as the box itself. She knelt down, inserted the key into the lock, and twisted. The sound of the latch releasing echoed in the quiet room. Tyler stepped closer as Evelyn opened the lid. Inside, beneath layers of faded fabric, were objects that seemed mundane at first glance: a stack of yellowed letters tied with a ribbon, a tarnished locket, and a black and white photograph of a young woman standing beside a man in a military uniform. But Evelyn's hands trembled as she touched each item, her expression a mix of pain and longing. This is what we risk trespassing for? Tyler asked, unable to hide his frustration. These are pieces of my past, Evelyn said softly, her voice barely audible. She picked up the photograph and stared at it, her thumb brushing over the man's face. And they hold the key to your future. Tyler blinked. What are you talking about? Evelyn hesitated, as though debating how much to reveal. Finally, she sighed and gestured for Tyler to sit. Do you recognize this man? She asked, holding up the photograph. Tyler studied it, but the faces were unfamiliar. Should I? No, Evelyn said, placing the photo back into the box. Not yet. But he played a role in events that shaped my life, and, indirectly, yours. Tyler frowned, his patience wearing thin. Look, Evelyn, I'm not in the mood for riddles. Just tell me what's going on. Evelyn closed the box and folded her hands on top of it, meeting his gaze. There are things I've kept hidden for decades, Tyler. Secrets that, if revealed, could ruin powerful people. But those secrets also involve your family. Tyler's chest tightened. My family? Yes, Evelyn said, her tone firm. You may not know this, but I knew your grandmother. We were close, once. And then I betrayed her in a way I've regretted every day since. The words hit Tyler like a blow. You knew my grandmother? He asked, his voice rising. Why didn't you tell me this before? I wasn't ready, Evelyn admitted. And I wasn't sure if you'd even want to know. But retrieving this box, it's the first step in making things right. Not just for me, but for you, too. Tyler shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. So what now? You're going to explain everything? Or is this just another cryptic clue in whatever game you're playing? Evelyn stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkened grounds. I'll explain, Tyler. But not tonight. You've done enough for one day. Tyler felt a surge of anger. You can't just drop a bombshell like that and expect me to walk away. Evelyn turned to face him, her expression softer now. I know this is overwhelming. But I need you to trust me a little longer. Tomorrow, we'll talk. I promise. Tyler wanted to argue, but the exhaustion of the night caught up with him. He sighed and stood. Fine. But if you keep dodging my questions, I'm done. Evelyn nodded, watching him leave the room. Once the door closed behind him, she turned back to the box, her fingers brushing over the letters inside. A single tear slipped down her cheek before she wiped it away and closed the lid. Back in his room, Tyler lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed everything Evelyn had said, every strange look, every vague answer. Who was the man in the photograph? And what could Evelyn possibly have done to his grandmother that still haunted her after all these years? Sleep didn't come easily. When it did, it was filled with fragmented dreams, images of the oak tree, the box, and Evelyn's face, her gray eyes filled with something Tyler couldn't quite name. Guilt? Regret? Or something deeper? By the time the sun rose, Tyler was no closer to answers. But he knew one thing for certain, whatever Evelyn was hiding, it was only the beginning. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Harper estate, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Tyler shuffled into the kitchen, still groggy from a night of restless sleep. Evelyn was already there, seated at the breakfast table, impeccably dressed as always. Her composure seemed unshaken, but Tyler could see the faint traces of fatigue in her eyes. Coffee, she offered, lifting the pot as if last night's revelations hadn't happened. Tyler sat down across from her, his arms crossed. I don't think coffee is going to cut it, Evelyn. We need to talk. She poured a cup anyway, sliding it across to him with a practiced grace. We will, she said. But first, I need to show you something. Tyler raised an eyebrow but followed her as she led him out of the kitchen and into a part of the house he hadn't explored before. The walls were lined with photographs, black and white images of people dressed in 1940s and 50s fashion. Tyler stopped in front of one picture in particular, a younger Evelyn, standing arm in arm with a beautiful woman who looked eerily familiar. "That's your grandmother," Evelyn said softly, stopping beside him. Tyler turned to her, startled. "That's her? I've only ever seen a few pictures of her, but, wow. She was extraordinary," Evelyn said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "Strong, kind, and fiercely loyal. We were closer than sisters once." Tyler couldn't reconcile the warmth in Evelyn's tone with the woman he had come to know. "If you were so close, then what happened?" Evelyn hesitated, her hand brushing over the frame of the photo. "It's a long story, Tyler. One that doesn't paint me in a flattering light. But you deserve to hear it." They returned to the study, the box still sitting on the desk where they'd left it the night before. Evelyn gestured for Tyler to sit as she opened the box once again, removing the letters one by one. "These letters were meant for your grandmother," Evelyn explained, holding up the stack. "I wrote them after I made the mistake that cost us everything. But I never had the courage to send them." Tyler leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "What kind of mistake?" Evelyn sighed, sinking into the chair across from him. "I was young and ambitious, determined to make a name for myself in a world that didn't take kindly to women with ambition. Your grandmother, Clara, was my closest confidant. She believed in me when no one else did." Her gaze grew distant as she continued. "But then I met Richard. He was charming, powerful, and utterly ruthless. Clara warned me about him, told me he was dangerous, but I didn't listen. I thought I could handle him, that I could use his influence to get ahead." Tyler's stomach tightened. He could sense where this was going, but he let her continue. "Richard was married at the time," Evelyn said, her voice cracking slightly. "But that didn't stop me. I thought I was in love. Clara found out and confronted me. She begged me to end it, told me I was making a terrible mistake. But I didn't listen." Evelyn's eyes met Tyler's, and for the first time, he saw genuine remorse there. "She tried to protect me, Tyler. And I repaid her by betraying her trust. When Richard's wife found out about us, she threatened to ruin me. I panicked and made a deal that destroyed Clara's life instead of mine." Tyler felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of deal?" Evelyn swallowed hard. "I told Richard's wife about Clara's financial struggles, knowing she'd use that information against her. Clara lost everything, her home, her business, her reputation, all because of me." The room fell silent, the weight of Evelyn's confession settling over them like a heavy fog. Tyler didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to lash out, to accuse her of being selfish and heartless. But another part of him saw the pain etched into her face, the way her hands trembled as she held the letters. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked finally. "Because you deserve to know the truth," Evelyn said. "And because I've spent the last 50 years trying to make amends for what I did. Marrying you wasn't just about helping you, it was about giving something back to Clara's family. It's the least I can do." Tyler leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "This is a lot to process." "I know," Evelyn said. "But I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want you to understand why I've done the things I've done." The rest of the day passed in a haze. Tyler wandered the estate, replaying Evelyn's words over and over in his mind. He wanted to hate her for what she had done, but he couldn't ignore the sincerity in her voice or the regret in her eyes. For the first time, he saw her not as the cold, calculating woman the world believed her to be, but as someone who had made mistakes and paid dearly for them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Tyler found himself back in the study. The box was still there, its contents laid out neatly on the desk. He picked up one of the letters and began to read. The words were raw and heartfelt, filled with apologies and reflections on the choices Evelyn had made. By the time he finished, Tyler felt a strange sense of clarity. He still didn't know if he could forgive Evelyn, but he understood her better now. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The next morning, Tyler found Evelyn already in the study, standing by the desk with the box open in front of her. She seemed different, her usual composed exterior softened, as if unburdening herself had taken years off her shoulders. Tyler entered cautiously, unsure how to approach her after their conversation the previous day. "Good morning," he said, his voice tentative. Evelyn glanced up, offering a faint smile. "Good morning, Tyler. I wasn't sure if you'd come back to this room after yesterday." Tyler shrugged, moving closer. "I figured we're in too deep to stop now. There's still a lot I don't understand." Evelyn gestured to the chair opposite her, and Tyler sat. She pulled out a small envelope from the box and placed it in front of him. "This might help you understand." Tyler picked up the envelope and slid out the contents, a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. He unfolded it to reveal a birth certificate. His heart skipped a beat when he read the name, Margaret Matthews, his mother. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. "It's proof," Evelyn said. "Proof that your mother is connected to all of this. To me, to Richard, to everything that happened back then." Tyler's hands shook as he stared at the document. "How is my mom involved? She never talked about anything like this." "She wouldn't have," Evelyn said softly. "Your mother was very young when all of this happened. She was Clara's daughter, just a child when the scandal broke. After Clara lost everything, she left the city with Margaret to escape the shame. That's why you never knew." Tyler leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed by the revelation. His mother had always been fiercely private, but he never imagined it was because of something so devastating. "So you destroyed my grandmother's life," he said bitterly, "and now you think throwing money at me makes up for it?" Evelyn flinched at his words but held his gaze. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Tyler. But I do want to make things right in whatever way I can." Tyler's jaw tightened as he looked back at the box. "What else is in there? What aren't you telling me?" Evelyn hesitated before pulling out a folded piece of fabric. She handed it to Tyler, who unfolded it to reveal a military insignia. "This belonged to Richard," she explained. "It was his last gift to me before everything fell apart." Tyler frowned, running his fingers over the worn fabric. "Why keep this? Why hold on to anything that reminds you of him?" Evelyn's expression darkened. "Because Richard didn't just ruin Clara's life. He ruined mine too. And I've spent every day since then trying to ensure his legacy doesn't harm anyone else." Tyler looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Evelyn took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "The documents in this box, they contain evidence of Richard's illegal dealings. Bribes, embezzlement, blackmail. I kept them as leverage, in case he ever tried to come after me. But after he died, I realized they could do more than protect me. They could expose the truth." The weight of her words settled over Tyler. "So you're saying, this isn't just about you or my family. It's about taking down people who were involved in Richard's crimes?" Evelyn nodded. "Exactly. Many of those people are still in power today, using their influence to harm others just like they harmed Clara. That's why I needed to retrieve the box, and why I need your help." Tyler's head spun. He had agreed to this bizarre marriage arrangement thinking it was a simple exchange of favors, but now he was entangled in a decades-old web of corruption and betrayal. "What kind of help?" he asked cautiously. "I can't do this alone," Evelyn said. "I need someone I can trust to deliver these documents to the right people. People who can expose the truth without putting us in danger." Tyler shook his head. This is insane. You're asking me to go up against people who could destroy us." "I know it's a lot to ask," Evelyn said quietly. "But you're stronger than you realize, Tyler. And I believe you're the only one who can help me finish what Clara started." Tyler spent the rest of the day grappling with Evelyn's request. He wandered the estate aimlessly, his thoughts a chaotic mix of anger, confusion, and an unexpected sense of responsibility. He thought of his grandmother, a woman he barely knew but whose legacy now seemed to define his life. He thought of his mother, who had shielded him from this painful history at great personal cost. And he thought of Evelyn, a woman whose actions had caused so much pain but who now seemed genuinely determined to make amends. As the sun set, Tyler found himself back in the study. Evelyn was there, as if waiting for him. She looked up as he entered, her expression unreadable. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "I'll help you. But I'm doing this for my family, not for you." Evelyn nodded, her eyes glistening. "That's all I could ask for." The next morning, Tyler woke with a heavy sense of purpose. He had agreed to help Evelyn, but the weight of the task loomed over him like a storm cloud. As he dressed and headed to the study, he rehearsed his questions, determined to get all the answers he needed before diving headfirst into a plan that could change everything. Evelyn was already there, seated by the open box. She seemed lost in thought, her fingers tracing the edges of the photograph she had shown him the night before. When she noticed him, she straightened, her expression unreadable. "I see you're ready," she said. "Not yet," Tyler replied, crossing his arms. "If I'm going to help you, I need to know everything. No more half-truths or vague explanations." Evelyn regarded him for a long moment before nodding. "Fair enough. Sit down." Tyler pulled up a chair, bracing himself for whatever she was about to reveal. Evelyn reached into the box and pulled out a bundle of papers, some yellowed with age, others more recent. She spread them across the desk, gesturing for Tyler to look. "These are the documents Richard left behind," she began. "Bank statements, contracts, letters, evidence of the deals he made with powerful figures in business and government. He was a master manipulator, and he used his connections to amass a fortune at the expense of others." Tyler scanned the pages, his stomach sinking as he read the details. Bribes, falsified records, and even threats, all of it meticulously recorded in Richard's own hand. "Why would he keep records of this?" Tyler asked. "Wasn't he afraid someone would find them?" Evelyn's lips twisted into a bitter smile. Richard was arrogant. He thought he was untouchable. He believed these documents would protect him, not incriminate him. And for a long time, he was right. Tyler leaned back, the enormity of the situation sinking in. "So what does this have to do with my family?" Evelyn hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of the desk. Richard didn't just destroy lives through his business dealings. He had a personal vendetta against anyone who stood in his way, including Clara. Tyler's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "After Clara confronted me about my affair with Richard, she made it clear she wouldn't stay silent. She was planning to expose him, to reveal the truth about his illegal activities. Richard found out and retaliated by targeting her financially. He had her loans called in, spread rumors that destroyed her reputation, and ensured she couldn't find work. She was forced to leave everything behind, all because she dared to stand up to him." Tyler clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "And you let this happen?" "I didn't know what he was planning," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "When I found out, it was too late. Clara was already gone, and Richard made it clear that if I tried to help her, I'd suffer the same fate." Tyler stared at her, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Part of him wanted to walk away, to leave Evelyn to deal with the mess she had helped create. But another part of him, a part that thought of his grandmother's strength and resilience, knew he couldn't turn his back now. "What's your plan?" he asked finally. Evelyn exhaled, relief flickering in her eyes. "There's a journalist I've been in contact with, a woman named Rachel Carter. She's been investigating corruption in high places for years. If we get these documents to her, she can expose the truth." "And you trust her?" Tyler asked skeptically. "She's the only person I trust," Evelyn replied. "But it won't be easy. Richard's associates will do everything in their power to stop this from coming to light." Tyler nodded, the weight of the task settling over him. "All right. Let's do it." Later that evening, Tyler sat in his room, staring at the documents Evelyn had entrusted to him. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages, the gravity of the situation hitting him anew. These weren't just pieces of paper, they were weapons, capable of toppling powerful figures and reshaping lives. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting him from his thoughts. It was a text from his mother. "How's everything going? Are you okay?" Tyler stared at the screen, his chest tightening. His mother had no idea about the storm brewing around her, about the secrets that had shaped their lives. He typed a quick response, "I'm fine, just busy," and set the phone down, guilt gnawing at him. A knock at the door broke his reverie. Evelyn stepped in, her expression unusually soft. "You're quiet," she observed. "Just thinking," Tyler said, gesturing to the papers. "This is a lot to process." "I know," Evelyn said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But you're doing the right thing. Your grandmother would be proud." Tyler looked at her, searching for any hint of insincerity, but found none. "I hope so," he said quietly. "Because right now, it feels like I'm in way over my head." Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly steady. "You're stronger than you think, Tyler. And you're not alone in this." The next morning, they finalized their plan. Evelyn would arrange a meeting with Rachel Carter, and Tyler would deliver the documents in person. It was a simple plan on paper, but Tyler knew it wouldn't be without risks. As they prepared to leave, Evelyn handed Tyler the photograph of Clara. "Take this," she said. "It's a reminder of why we're doing this." Tyler slipped the photo into his pocket, the weight of his grandmother's legacy settling on his shoulders. He glanced at Evelyn, her determined expression mirroring his own. "Let's finish this," he said. Evelyn nodded, and together, they stepped into the unknown. The car ride to the meeting place was silent, the tension thick between Tyler and Evelyn. The weight of the documents in the leather briefcase on Tyler's lap mirrored the heaviness in his chest. He stared out the window at the passing streets, his thoughts racing. For all Evelyn's talk of making amends, he couldn't shake the lingering anger he felt, not just toward her, but toward the man whose actions had shattered his family's life. "We're almost there," Evelyn said, breaking the silence. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her usual air of calm replaced by a nervous energy. Tyler glanced at her. "You sure this journalist can be trusted?" "Yes," Evelyn replied firmly. "Rachel Carter has exposed people like Richard before. She's relentless and ethical. If anyone can take these documents and turn them into a weapon for justice, it's her." Tyler nodded, though doubt still lingered in the back of his mind. He shifted in his seat, the photograph of his grandmother tucked safely in his pocket. The reminder of her resilience gave him strength. Whatever happened today, he owed it to her to see this through. They arrived at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, chosen for its anonymity. Evelyn parked the car and turned to Tyler. "You'll go in alone. Rachel knows to expect you." "And you?" Tyler asked, his voice tinged with concern. Evelyn gave him a small, reassuring smile. "I'll wait here. This is your moment, Tyler. You're the one who can make this right." Tyler hesitated, then nodded. He stepped out of the car, clutching the briefcase tightly. As he walked toward the cafe, his heart pounded in his chest. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the scent of freshly brewed coffee. A woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a confident demeanor, sat alone at a corner table. She looked up as Tyler approached, her expression both cautious and curious. "Rachel Carter?" Tyler asked, his voice steady despite his nerves. She nodded, motioning for him to sit. "You must be Tyler Matthews." He slid into the seat across from her and set the briefcase on the table. "Evelyn Harper told me you could help us." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Evelyn Harper. Now, there's a name I didn't expect to resurface. She's been a ghost in this city for decades. Why now?" Tyler opened the briefcase, revealing the stack of documents. "Because she wants to make things right. These are from Richard, the man who ruined my grandmother's life. They prove everything, his crimes, his connections, everything he did to hurt people." Rachel's eyes widened as she scanned the papers. She pulled out a few and began reading, her expression shifting from curiosity to grim determination. This is huge," she said, her voice low. "If this is all legitimate, it could take down some very powerful people." "It is," Tyler said firmly. "And we need your help to make sure it gets out. Publicly." Rachel nodded slowly. I'll do everything I can. But you need to understand, this won't be easy. The people involved will fight back hard. There will be threats, lawsuits, maybe worse. I'm ready, Tyler said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. Rachel studied him for a moment, then extended her hand. All right, Tyler. Let's do this. He shook her hand, feeling a surge of relief and resolve. The documents were now in capable hands, and for the first time, he felt like they were on the right path. When Tyler returned to the car, Evelyn was waiting, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. How did it go? She asked. She took the documents, Tyler said, sinking into the passenger seat. She's going to expose everything. Evelyn let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging in relief. Thank you, Tyler. I know this hasn't been easy for you. Tyler looked at her, his emotions a swirl of anger, sadness, and something resembling understanding. I'm not doing this for you, Evelyn. I'm doing it for my family. For my grandmother. I know, Evelyn said quietly. She started the car, but Tyler's voice stopped her before she could pull away. Why did you wait so long to do this? He asked. If you've had those documents all these years, why not act sooner? Evelyn's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Fear, she admitted after a long pause. I was afraid of what would happen if I exposed the truth. Of what it would cost me. But seeing you, it reminded me of what really matters. It's not about my legacy or my comfort, it's about doing the right thing, even if it's hard. Tyler studied her, trying to reconcile the woman before him with the one who had caused so much pain. He didn't know if he could forgive her, but he couldn't deny the sincerity in her words. Over the next few weeks, Rachel worked tirelessly to verify the documents and build her case. Tyler stayed in contact with her, offering whatever support he could. The media began picking up whispers of the story, and soon, headlines exploded with revelations about Richard's crimes and the powerful figures who had conspired with him. Evelyn watched it all unfold from the quiet of her estate. She rarely spoke, but Tyler could see the relief in her eyes as the truth came to light. For the first time, it seemed, she was at peace. One evening, as they sat in the study, Tyler broke the silence. Do you regret it? He asked. Evelyn looked up, her expression thoughtful. Every day, she said. But regret alone doesn't change anything. Taking action does. And thanks to you, Tyler, we've done that. Tyler nodded, the weight on his chest lifting ever so slightly. He still didn't know if he could fully forgive Evelyn, but he realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past, it was about deciding how to move forward. As the weeks turned into months, the scandal rocked the city. Arrests were made, careers ended, and lives changed. Tyler visited his mother, finally sharing the truth about their family's history. She wept as she listened, her tears a mix of sorrow and catharsis. And Evelyn? She faded back into the shadows, content to let her actions speak louder than her presence ever could. She had spent a lifetime running from her mistakes, but now, at last, she had faced them head-on. Months had passed since the story broke, but the echoes of its impact could still be felt. Tyler sat at the kitchen table in his modest apartment, a cup of coffee cooling in front of him. The past weeks had been a whirlwind, interviews with journalists, navigating public attention, and the emotional task of piecing together the fragments of his family's history. For the first time in years, though, there was a sense of clarity in his life. The burden of his mother's hospital bills was gone, thanks to Evelyn's help, and he had enrolled in a part-time college program to study business, a dream he never thought he'd be able to afford. The sound of his phone buzzing broke his thoughts. He glanced at the screen and saw Evelyn's name. Answering it felt almost instinctive now. Hello? Good morning, Tyler, Evelyn said, her voice as sharp and poised as ever, though softer than it had been in the beginning. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all, Tyler replied. What's up? I was wondering if you might come by the estate, Evelyn said. I'd like to speak with you. Tyler hesitated for a moment. The dynamic between them had shifted since their initial arrangement. There was less tension, more understanding, but the complexities of their shared history lingered. Still, he found himself agreeing. "I'll be there in an hour." When Tyler arrived at the Harper estate, Evelyn was waiting for him in the garden. She sat on a wrought iron bench beneath a canopy of blooming flowers, the rusted box now clean and gleaming at her feet. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile, though her gaze remained sharp. "Thank you for coming," Evelyn said as Tyler approached. She gestured for him to sit beside her, and he complied, the quiet of the garden wrapping around them like a cocoon. "You've been busy," Evelyn said, a hint of amusement in her tone. "I saw your name in one of Rachel's articles. You've become quite the advocate." Tyler shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. Someone had to keep the pressure on. People deserve to know what really happened. Evelyn nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Your grandmother would be proud of you, Tyler. I hope you know that." The mention of Clara brought a lump to Tyler's throat, but he managed a nod. "I hope so." They sat in silence for a moment before Evelyn reached down and opened the box. She pulled out the photograph of Clara and handed it to Tyler. "I think it's time you kept this," she said. "It belongs with you." Tyler took the photo, his fingers brushing over the edges. The image of his grandmother, smiling and full of life, filled him with a bittersweet warmth. "Thank you," he said quietly. "There's something else," Evelyn continued, her voice growing softer. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a set of keys, placing them in Tyler's hand. "What are these?" he asked, frowning. "The estate," Evelyn said simply. "It's yours now." Tyler blinked, staring at her. "What?" "Evelyn, I can't." "You can," she interrupted firmly. "I've lived my life, Tyler. And I've made my peace with it. This place deserves to be filled with new memories, new life. Not haunted by my mistakes." Tyler shook his head, overwhelmed. "Evelyn, this is too much. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take it," Evelyn said, her tone softening. "And that you'll use it to build something good. Something your grandmother would be proud of." Tyler's throat tightened, and he nodded. "All right. I'll take it. But only if you promise to visit." Evelyn chuckled, the sound light and genuine. "We'll see about that." The weeks that followed were filled with change. Tyler moved into the estate, determined to honor Evelyn's wishes and create something meaningful. He opened the doors to the community, hosting events and programs to support young people struggling to find their way, people like he had once been. Evelyn, true to her word, kept her distance, though she sent letters from time to time. Her words were always encouraging, filled with pride for the man Tyler was becoming. One evening, as Tyler walked through the estate's garden, he found himself thinking of her. The path she had set him on was unexpected, but it had given him purpose. For the first time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The estate was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, the garden alive with the hum of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. Tyler stood on the patio, gazing at the horizon, a faint smile on his lips. Life had taken a turn he never could have anticipated, and though the journey had been fraught with challenges, he finally felt a sense of peace. A knock at the door drew him from his thoughts. He walked through the grand hallway, the familiar creak of the polished wooden floors under his feet grounding him in the moment. Opening the door, he was greeted by the sight of Evelyn. She stood there, her frame slightly frilier than the last time he'd seen her, but her eyes still carried the same spark. "Evelyn," Tyler said, surprised. "I didn't think I'd see you again so soon." She offered a wry smile, holding up a small wrapped package. "I thought it was time to visit and deliver this in person. May I come in?" "Of course," Tyler said, stepping aside to let her in. They walked to the sitting room, where Evelyn sank into an armchair with a quiet sigh. Tyler took the seat across from her, his curiosity piqued by the package in her lap. "This place looks different," Evelyn remarked, glancing around. "Livelier." "You've done well." "Thanks," Tyler said. "I wanted it to feel like it had a purpose. Something meaningful." Evelyn nodded approvingly before placing the package on the table between them. "This is for you," she said. "Something I've been holding onto for far too long." Tyler leaned forward, unwrapping the package carefully. Inside was a wooden box, intricately carved with patterns that seemed to tell a story of their own. He opened it to reveal a collection of items: a delicate gold locket, a faded journal, and a letter sealed with a wax stamp. "These belonged to your grandmother," Evelyn explained. "The locket was hers, the journal contains her thoughts during those difficult years, and the letter, well, that's something I wrote to her but never had the courage to send." Tyler stared at the items, his chest tightening. "Evelyn, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Evelyn said softly. "Just keep them safe. They're a part of her story. And yours." Tyler picked up the locket, turning it over in his hands. Inside, he found a tiny photograph of Clara, smiling alongside a baby, his mother. He swallowed the lump in his throat, the weight of his family's legacy settling over him. As the evening stretched on, Tyler and Evelyn sat together, reminiscing and reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. They spoke of Clara, of Richard, and of the choices that had shaped their lives. There was pain in the memories, but also a quiet catharsis. Before she left, Evelyn stood and turned to Tyler, her eyes glistening. "You've done more than I ever could to honor your grandmother's memory, Tyler. I hope you know that." Tyler rose, walking her to the door. "You've done a lot too, Evelyn. More than you give yourself credit for." She smiled faintly, patting his arm. "Take care of this place, Tyler. And take care of yourself." "I will," he promised. "Thank you for everything." Evelyn nodded, and with that, she stepped into the night, her figure illuminated briefly by the porch light before fading into the shadows. The next morning, Tyler stood in the garden, the locket around his neck and the journal in his hands. He opened it carefully, reading his grandmother's words for the first time. Her entries were raw and honest, filled with hope, heartbreak, and resilience. As he read, he felt her presence more vividly than ever before, her strength guiding him forward. Later that day, he placed the wooden box on a shelf in the estate's library, ensuring it would be preserved for generations to come. It was a reminder of the past, but also a symbol of the future, a future built on truth, redemption, and the courage to face life's challenges head-on. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Tyler walked through the garden one last time. He paused by the fountain, the soft trickle of water filling the air, and looked up at the stars. The journey that had started with an unlikely marriage and a buried box had led him here, to a life he never could have imagined. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, he felt whole.